Hi, you beautiful New Zealanders. Well, we're in a series about how we as a country are inching towards tribal rule, and this is the fourth video in the series. So New Zealand is creeping towards Maori being in total control of this country. Every area of our society has been affected. So watch this. We are now a two-tier nation. In the first video in this series, I detailed many of the ways in which Maori in New Zealand have been privileged. Really, it's an avalanche of privileges. Not just a few privileges, it's an avalanche they are receiving, and the list is growing by the day. As a result, New Zealand is now an apartheid state, an ethno-state, where racism and separatism are alive and well. You know that. You know what? What's most painful of all is that the government is sanctioning the establishment of this two-tier society, even fueling it. That's a fact. MPs are allowing this to happen, even putting fuel on the fire. To put it in plain English, for 50 years, taxpayers have been literally paying radical Maori to take over our country. For example, the government agreed to pay the legal fees of the activists when they sue the government. It's hard to imagine a more ridiculous situation, but this is what's happening. Honestly, it's ridiculous. In video 2, we asked the question, well, you know what, how do we get to this place in our country? And we said there were 5 sources. The first source is New Zealand legislation, and that's important laws and court cases. So here's a quick revision. First, we examined the 1974 Maori Affairs Amendment Act, which redefined what a Maori was. Before 1974, a Maori was someone with 50% or more Maori blood. This act changed all of that. From 1974 onwards, a Maori was someone who says they are a Maori, even if they have no Maori blood. In other words, you just self-identify. You rock up and say, I am a Maori, even if you've got no Maori blood. So why was this change significant? Well, the more Maori there are, the more seats in Parliament you're likely to get, and therefore, if you've got more seats in Parliament, then you have more say in Parliament. You see how it goes? You get it. Maori receive funding and privilege based on the number of Maori in New Zealand. That's a fact. Not only this, but the number of Maori seats in Parliament is determined by how many Maori are on the Maori electoral roll. So, if there are more Maori in New Zealand, it is statistically more likely that more Maori will enrol on the Maori roll. That's just obvious. In turn, this will give Maori more seats in Parliament. More seats in Parliament means more say, and more say means Maori can take over the country more quickly. See how it goes? What I want you to realise is that this is all carefully planned. These acts of Parliament don't happen by chance. You got activists working inside and around and through the government to make these acts a reality. You imagine if you had 30 Rawiri Waititis in Parliament, what it would be like. Well, there you go. So what about the Treaty of Waitangi Act 1975? In video 3, we did a deep dive into the Treaty of Waitangi Act 1975. We concluded it was framed in such a way so as to invite fraud and corruption. The cause of Maori activists was put on turbo through this act, no doubt about that. In video 3, we discussed why this is so. How did it put Maori activists' cause on turbo? Well, here's a summary so far. How do we come to live in a two-tier society, a country where apartheid, separatism and racism is now quite acceptable to most MPs, particularly national MPs and current Prime Minister? They all think it's great. They think we're in partnership. They think it's wonderful. Tragically, they have simply come to accommodate it. They've just accommodated it, that we are now living in a two-tier society, and they think that's just normal. Well, how do we get there? And I've explained. We went through the Maori Affairs Amendment Act 1974, that was video 2. And then the Treaty of Waitangi Act 1975, that was video 3. And then the Treaty of Waitangi Amendment Act 1984, which is what I'm going to deal with today. So hang on to your seatbelt, here it is. To start this video, I want to tell you a fable. This fable is highly relevant to Maori activists and how they operate. According to a classic tale, one cold night, a camel asked his master if he can put his nose in the tent for warmth. By all means, and welcome, said the man. And the camel stretches his nose into the tent. Soon after, camel inquires if he may also bring his head inside. Again, the master agrees. Soon after, the camel inquires if he may also bring his neck inside. Again, the master agrees. Then the camel inquires if he may also bring his front legs inside. Again, the master agrees. Finally, the camel asks, may I not stand wholly within? With pity, the master beckons him into the warm tent. But when the camel comes forward, it becomes clear that the tent is too small for them both. I think, the camel said, that there is not room for both of us here. It will be best for you to stand outside, as you are the smaller. There will then be room enough for me. Look at that. And with that, the man is forced outside his tent. Now that is a hugely relevant and important fable for what's happening in New Zealand, and I'm going to explain why. The fable is a warning that small, seemingly harmless acts can often lead over time to huge negative repercussions. And that's the purpose of this parable. That's the main message. It's all about control. So how does this fable relate to Maori activists? To gain control of some piece of land, some situation or sea or beach or some lake or some mountain or some river or some asset, some person, some entity, some project, some school or education body, some farm or a club, whatever, they start small. See, they just put their nose in the tent, then their head, then their neck, then the front legs, and then boom, the whole thing's in. Little by little. For example, when the Treaty of Waitangi Act was enacted in 1975, the Waitangi Tribunal was mandated to investigate breaches of the treaty forward from 1975. So forward's the key word. The act represents the camel putting his nose in the tent. Only 5 claims were registered in 1975. Then activists infiltrated the tribunal. Now the camel's whole head was in the tent. Then in 1984 the act was amended to investigate claims back to 1840. You know what? The number of claims rocketed up to 2034 by June 2009. Now the camel's nose, head and neck was in the tent. And there's the reference for that number 2034. So it's all little by little. Today there are 10,000 claims registered. Watch this video.
Maori Crown Relations Minister, how do you see the current state of Maori Crown relationships?
Well, first of all, there are 2 ministers involved with Te Arawhiti. Minister Goldsmith looks after the negotiations for treaty settlements, and Tapu Taimoana, customary foreshore seabed matters. And I look after a number of other things like events and making sure that some of the settlement obligations that are outstanding are implemented. So I think some things are going really well. The Māori Crown Relations portfolio is also responsible for implementing the settlement obligations that are outstanding, and there are over 10,000 of those outstanding, mainly with organisations and agencies such as Te Papa Atawhai, Department of Conservation, and LINZ, Land Information New Zealand. So that's one area where I've got a big focus with my team at Te Arawhiti, is to make sure we understand the gamut of responsibilities that come after treaty settlements are arranged and the legislation's gone through. Okay, what obligations do we have now? And there's a lot of work that we have to do in that space to make sure we follow through. And the Crown's obligations do not stop when a settlement arrangement is concluded. Actually, they continue over time, and that's the promise of Te Tiriti o Waitangi, the Treaty of Waitangi.
Okay, well, that's not the promise of Te Tiriti o Waitangi. There's nothing about that in the treaty whatsoever, so there is a lot of BS going down there. But anyway, the point is that there are 10,000 claims. You see how the camel's got in the tent? Can you see how the camel in the tent fable is being played out? We moved from 5 claims at the Waitangi Tribunal in 1975 to 2,034 claims in 2009 to 10,000 claims in 2024. The camel, you know what, is not just moving in, but replacing existing ownership and structures. The scenario is being played out in education, local councils, and every government department. There's a takeover going on in every single sphere of New Zealand society. Camel is slowly moving into the tent in every area of our society. It's called takeover by increment, or if you want to be really blunt, it's just a coup by stealth. So what's the lesson we got to learn, Eve? Don't even let the nose of the camel into the tent. That is the lesson. The Maori Affairs Amendment Act 1974 should never have been allowed to happen, nor the Treaty of Waitangi Act 1975, nor the Treaty of Waitangi Amendment Act 1984, nor the Marine and Coastal Act 2011, nor UNDRIP, and so on. The list of acts and legislation that have been passed in the name of the Treaty of Waitangi, 99.9% of them should never ever have been passed. Yep, that's the truth. So what are the implications? Okay, back to the Treaty of Waitangi Amendment Act 1984. With each new claim, money, assets or land, or all 3, are transferred from public ownership to Maori ownership. Now here's the thing. Given that New Zealand has finite resources, that is, we have limited money, limited assets and limited land. We're only 2 islands, we only have so much cash and we only have so many assets. If this claiming continues at the present rate, it will only be a matter of time when we reach the point where the whole of New Zealand will belong to Maori. Well, ironically, that's the plan. That's what they want. This is what activists are shooting for, this according to 2 key documents, Hei Puapua and MATIKE. Now I'll put those documents in the description of this video. Don't forget that there are 60 people working full-time inside the Waitangi Tribunal at a cost of average $21 million per annum. It would be fair to say that we, the taxpayers, through the government, are paying people, that's the tribunal, to transfer cash, assets and land from public ownership to Maori ownership, and it's happening right under our noses. We are paying for the takeover of our country. Did you realise that? So right under our noses, when this transfer is fully completed, the camel, that's Maori, will be inside the tent. They'll be the ruling class, and we, that's non-Maori New Zealanders, will be outside the tent sleeping on the sand. Yep, we'll be the second-class citizens. This is the reality, guys. This is what's happening. This is the two-tier society which is well underway now. This is the camel moving into the tent. What's really disturbing and why I'm involved in this movement is that none of this is mandated in the treaty. The treaty mandates for all citizens to be equal before the law, with no privileges to any group, and democracy the cornerstone. That is the Treaty of Waitangi. See? The treaty is absolutely, definitely not a partnership. Absolutely not. So let's just look as we finish to the psychology of protest. We're about to see Maori activists protesting. They're going to be protesting against David Seymour's Treaty Principles Bill, and they're planning to all be in Parliament or down at Parliament in Wellington when that bill has its first reading. What are they doing? Well, all they're doing is putting pressure on politicians, causing them to fear, which in turn triggers politicians to appease Maori, which ultimately is what Maori activists want. Appeasement. That's what they want. It's a strategy that has worked well for Maori activists. They will continue to use it as long as politicians keep on appeasing them. Politicians don't realize it, but appeasement encourages protest and dissension. So there's a vicious cycle here. Protest, appeasement, protest, then appeasement, protest, then appeasement. Protesters love it. Why? Because they worked it all out. Because every appeasement, either big or small, is a win for Maori, taking them a step towards total control in 2040. See how it works? See that? So I just want to finish with thank you. There are 19 strategies that activists use to inch towards total control by 2040. I have detailed these in the description of this video. Alright, that's enough for today's video. I want to keep them short. Thanks for watching. As usual, please like, comment, subscribe and share. And also thank you so much for those who are chipping in financially. This is a huge help. Okay, great guys. Love you all. See you next time.